Now, a new climate report has laid bare some startling findings on global temperature and sea level rises. Scientists from the world's top weather agencies have sounded the alarm a day before a major climate summit at the United Nations. They found the average global temperature between 2015 and 2019 will likely be the hottest of any 5-year period on record. On top of that, Arctic summer sea ice has declined at a rate of 12% per decade over the past 40 years. And making matters worse, greenhouse gas emissions continue to increase. Carbon dioxide grew by 2% in 2018, reaching a record high. Now let's speak to Tom Burke, who's the chairman of E3G, a think tank focusing on climate change, and he's also a former government environmental advisor, and he joins us now live from London. Mr. Burke, we've known what the dangers were of not taking action for years. Are we now seeing even more worrying climate change impacts than we expected?
Yes, I think we are. What the WMO are saying publicly is what climate scientists have been saying privately for some time, which is that climate is turning out to be more sensitive to inputs of greenhouse gases than we previously thought. And that means the urgency of dealing with the problem is growing faster. And they're also saying that the rest of the Earth system is responding faster. So the impact of a changing climate on human beings is not only occurring quicker than they thought, but it's also nastier than they thought.
So are these the feedback loops that we've been hearing about that could lead to runaway climate change? And tell us a little more about what that could look like.
Well, I don't think the scientists are yet saying that these are actually expressions of a kind of real shift in a tipping point in the way the climate system's working. But clearly, the thought of this all happening at a more sensitive means those tipping points are coming closer to what we're doing. So I think the danger is growing, and that means that we have much less time to solve the problem than we thought we had. So we were basically, if we want to tackle climate change and stay within the Paris Agreement, we have to stop burning fossil fuels by about the middle of the century. We now may have to do that somewhat sooner than the middle of the century.
Well, let me ask you a little more about the Paris Agreement, because it left it up to national governments to set their own targets despite having agreed on a carbon budget. So you're saying that Paris wasn't enough?
Paris definitely isn't enough to keep the climate safe. That's absolutely right. It was the best that we could be achieved at the time, and now the effort, and I think this is what the Secretary General has called this summit for, is to say we've got to now do more and commit to doing more, and that's why the 60 countries that are going to be speaking at his summit are countries that have said they're at least willing to think about doing more. But I think what's also important is not just to focus on what governments are doing, because that could make you very gloomy. The fact is that also we're seeing a lot more, a much more rapid fall in the costs of renewables and storage than we'd anticipated. So the cost of dealing with climate change is going down, and we're deploying those technologies faster than we thought we might be able to.
So some good news there, at least. Tom Burke from E3G, a think tank focusing on climate change. Thank you for joining us on Al Jazeera, Mr. Burke.